Earlier, First Minister Peter Robinson, acting in his capacity as a mere East Belfast MLA, introduced a motion calling for the Assembly to cut its own costs. And the Assembly's subsidy of the Stormont canteen was providing food for thought.
I find it very hard to justify, particularly at a time of austerity, that there should be some kind of subsidy of the meals around these premises. I'm not saying that we should not be competitive, because we don't want the members and staff to be going elsewhere, but we should not be subsidising when people out there are having massive difficulties, and in the months and years ahead will have even more difficulties in having sufficient money to be able to pay their food bills. And I would ask the Assembly Commission to look at that issue.
So, the First Minister, Peter Robinson, said he didn't want to pressurise MLAs, but he felt that they should be sharing the pain in the current economic climate. But what about those constitutional concerns and the fact that we're cheaper here, as Robert Coulter argued? I put those points to the Finance Minister, Sammy Wilson.
And that's playing with figures, of course, Jim, because if you consider that we have about 2.5 times more members than what Scotland would have, then of course the denominator into the figure is much bigger, and therefore gives a smaller outcome at the end of the day. I'm sure that Bob Coulter knew exactly what he was doing when he made that point, but you know, I think you've got to look behind those figures, and when you do look behind them, we still are fairly costly.
What about the constitutional issue there raised by Sinn Féin, that this is Peter Robinson as First Minister almost telling the Assembly, an independent body, what to do?
Well, he wasn't, of course, and he made it quite clear that he wasn't. But, you know, I think that the Assembly cannot expect to be exempt from the pressures which there are on all other government departments. And indeed, there are occasions when the Assembly might do very well to listen to some of the advice it gets from ministers. And I suspect that had they listened to Mark Durkan about 6 years ago, they wouldn't have bought a white elephant at Ormiston House, which they're now going to lose millions on. And you know, he made the point during the debate, a very valid point, that he had warned about it at that stage, but the Assembly Commission had decided they didn't want any interference by DFP, and therefore stumbled into an expensive purchase, which we're going to have to pay for. You know, so I think that whilst yes, there is that independence, nevertheless, you cannot ignore the fact it's all part of the public sector. The public sector is taking cuts, so why shouldn't the Assembly take cuts? And there is a good advice which can be obtained from other government departments which the Assembly should take heed of.
But is it not just populist politics at the moment? I mean, you've talked about cutting ministerial cars. Peter Robinson talks about cutting the subsidy in the canteen. Here it's chicken feed when we're talking about big figures for the whole budget.
Well, you see, I get this from ministers all the time when I suggest to them things they could do in their department. Oh, it's chicken feed in relation to the total budget. But, you know, there is going to be no kind of magic bullet that you're going to say, cut that one thing and you will solve the deficit. The deficit will be solved in looking at the whole range of things which are done. And I must say I've been very, very encouraged. Members of the public have written into me, civil servants have written into me, and some of the things that, you know, they've suggested might seem minuscule. But nevertheless, it's an indication they're thinking about their jobs, they're thinking about savings to be made, and the cumulative effect of all of those small savings will be the thing which I believe will enable us to make a more lean and efficient public sector.
And of course, the budget, the big question, when are we going to see it?
Well, I would have hoped that it would have been approved by the Executive about a week ago. I had indicated I was prepared to bring it as soon as the CSR announcement was made. I can't bring it without the support of the Executive. They have to instruct me to bring a budget forward to them. I haven't been able to receive that approval so far. The one thing I do know is that time is running out. We've got to get certainty. There's lots of people who are concerned about their jobs who don't need to be concerned about their jobs, but they will remain having that concern until their departmental budget is sorted out. There are contractors who are concerned about contracts, probably don't need to be, but until the budget is decided, they'll not know for certain. Same with community groups and a whole range of people. And you know, the longer we keep people in limbo like this, the less fair I think it is, and then the more rushed the decisions are going to be, and probably the worse the decisions are going to be because they are rushed.